I'm your big mama now, and auntie school is in session because we're going to learn how to make a nice country breakfast for the low. You have seen these biscuits before. I've made them in a previous video, but I gotta ask, could you make this without shredding the butter? Because everybody don't have a little shredder thing. And that's what we're going to test out today. So I'm actually cutting the butter. I'm getting it as thin as I can, but I'm trying to be mindful, like not everybody has tools. So I'm like, how small can I get this with just a knife? That's what I'm working towards. So the butter is still frozen and I'm slicing it up, and I'm going to put it back in the freezer so that it maintains its shape. Then, you know, we go right on in. Our second ingredient is the heavy cream. The video for this will be tagged. I didn't have enough heavy cream, so I did end up going in with a little bit of milk just to stretch it. So now it's time to get that flour in the bowl. And I am measuring the flour, but it is still a rough measurement. Like, if I wanted a precise measurement, I would have weighed it out, and I'm not doing that. I'm just gonna use this to kind of get like a rough estimate, because I'm still gonna add more wet or dry depending on how the dough is looking. So we're gonna start slowly incorporating this dough together. So I made a little well in the middle, and you just start adding in that heavy cream and slowly start stirring it. You don't want to just dump it in, you know, I said it last time, don't just dump all of that in. Again, these biscuits are a recipe that I improved upon personally, I would say. It is a 2-ingredient biscuit option where you could just mix together the self-rising flour and the heavy cream, and you can still just make a biscuit with those two. I add the butter, like that's my extra addition, and I do think it makes a difference. But if you ain't got all the time in the world, or you just not interested in doing that at that particular moment, you know, skip the butter step. Just get this part incorporated until it's a nice little dough, and then you can roll it out and form biscuits. Like, it'll look just like this, and you just plop it out and you can roll up some biscuits. But now that we have this dough, we're gonna do that little faux lamination step again. I like to stop mixing the biscuits in the bowl while it's still a little on the damper side, because I'm going to be adding the flour to the surface, so I don't want it to get too dry. So that's why it was still a little sticky there. And at this point here, you can just cut these up and you can make them into biscuits. But again, we're going to do my tried and true technique of adding in some butter for a little extra flavor. I don't know what was going on with me this time. Like, I'm doing the lamination, but for whatever reason, I could not get it through my head that I needed to add more flour. So you're gonna see me struggling with this dough quite a few times. I'm just gonna apologize now. And it really was just because I'm like, okay, why is this not incorporating how I want to? It's because it was sticking to the board here. And I don't know, it was just like a brain fart. But you know what? Players fuck up too. Oops, I'm not supposed to say that, am I? Players make mistakes. So, yeah, so I'm gonna add that first little layer of butter, pat it down. I didn't want to mix it. I'm still like trying to do the lamination at this point. But I could tell when this knife went in here, I'm like, this dough a little too sticky. And I'm just trying to make it work. I even put it in the refrigerator once or twice. But it's just like, I was so nervous about the big pieces of butter that I don't know. Like, is anything wrong with this? No, like, it's the same concept, but it's just, I feel like the butter kind of went in a little smoother with the smaller pieces. So we're just gonna see if this works out here, because I could see these big pieces of butter just poking out everywhere, and it was just making me a little scared. But I try these things for y'all, okay? I want y'all to get in the kitchen and chef it up, because buying that food, yeah, we're not doing that. We're in the house with it. So just like any other biscuit, when you fold and then you pat down without like smushing the layers out, keeping them nice and uniform, that's what we're doing here, except for we're just adding butter to each of those layers to give us a fake lamination, which is when you have layers of butter and pastry like a croissant. So croissants are made with all those layers through a process of lamination, but they are very time consuming to make because of the process of lamination. So that's why we have faux lamination, which I'm doing here. Just adding butter, and then layering it on top and then kind of smushing it back down so that when all of this goes into the oven, we'll have our butter melting, and the water that escapes from the butter is going to create steam, which is going to give us some little layers. That is a similar process to what you would do with like any other biscuit, but this biscuit is just a bit simpler, and it's fewer ingredients because you have to measure and weigh things out, be mindful of what the dough looks like, and a whole longer process with like a buttermilk biscuit. These are just 2 ingredients and then adding some butter. It doesn't get simpler than that. So that's why we're going for this. This can be done in advance. I'm not doing it in advance. So if you want to whip these together, I would still pop them in the freezer for a little while. I feel like what makes this work for a day project is making sure you keep everything cold. So right now I got my house cold first of all, and then I'm going to pop this in and out of the refrigerator or freezer as I need to, because I'm just not trying to melt that butter that's in there. And you can see at this point, that butter is sticking out and making me nervous, and I'm like, what am I doing wrong? And then that's when I realized I should be adding more flour. So I'm adding some flour down so it can stop sticking. And then I didn't have to do this many layers. It was just because everything just kept sticking, so I'm just kind of doing this just so that I can get some uniformity without it just completely falling apart on me. So yeah, you really only have to do that lamination step, I would say 3 or 4 times. It doesn't take that long. Just do it until it feels like it's right. It's not going to get significantly taller if you add a bunch of layers, because they're going to eventually smush down. But you can see all that butter poking out there, and I'm like, I don't know if this is good or bad, so we just gonna, we're gonna roll with it. But I wanted to make sure I could get that butter inside of it instead of poking out the bottom, because it'll just melt at the bottom. So I just did another little layer right there. Now we're officially done with the layers, and again, since I'm doing a science project, we did a little bit extra. Okay, if I would have been just grating the butter, I would have done this a lot faster, but I wanted to make sure I really got those layers in. So you can see those little lines. I got my layers looking nice. I'm gonna just start cutting these up roughly. I don't have a biscuit cutter, and I really don't plan on getting one. You just have a sharp knife and you cut straight down without wiggling it around. You'll get the biscuits cut perfectly. I prefer a square biscuit just because I feel like I get better surface area and less waste, because when you cut biscuits, you have all the scraps, you gotta round them back up. Yeah, so I just cut my little rectangle squares, whatever I end up making, and I'm gonna cover this whole thing. I had this piece of foil laying around, so I'm covering that up and putting it in the refrigerator while I make the rest of my food, just so that I can get that butter firmed back up. I don't know what it is, when I get on camera, all of a sudden I do not know how to crack an egg. I messed up both of these eggs, and then the third time it was all right, we're good. So yeah, to make your eggs super fluffy, this is a pro tip. You could just add a little bit of water. I know people say add add milk all the time, and that's kind of just a waste of an ingredient, because it's just water that's in the milk that's making them a little bit fluffier. So just add a little water. You don't need much. Another tip is don't salt your eggs yet. Add the salt right before you put it in the pan, or add it in right as you let it touch the pan. Okay, and I'm making mine in a cast iron back here, as you can see. I be freaking people out when I do that. Are y'all afraid of cast irons? I'm just kind of curious, like, why cast irons like aren't being pushed as much recently. Like, the grannies and stuff, they had them and we kind of like let them go, but then now nobody likes non-stick, so it's just like, okay, if we're not rocking with the non-stick pans, why aren't we vibing with the cast irons again? You know, like, what's the it pan now that they want to do away with non-stick pans? I don't know. But anyway, we're gonna get started on the eggs, and as you can see, mine needed a little bit more seasoning when I looked in that pan. Don't be afraid to season them eggs, okay? And yes, I be seasoning my pan down, okay? I'm real good at cooking in the cast iron. I like it better than a non-stick, I won't lie to you. It's just heavy. That's my only problem, is I don't want to be lugging that pan around all the time. It's not really hard to clean because I do such a good job of like keeping the surface non-stick. Like, you saw how that egg lifted up off of there? Whew. It's so great. But anyway, we're just gonna cook these eggs down, and while I'm cooking these eggs, I do have my oven preheating right now because I'm gonna get ready to put those biscuits in there, but I just didn't want them to like start melting or anything. I wanted them to keep that butter nice and firm in its position so that when it goes in the oven, it's not melting down, it's pushing the biscuits up, if that makes sense. You know how biscuits go up, right? Yeah, that. So my little pro tip for eggs is add the cheese in the middle. Do not put it on the top. I put the cheese like right in between like two halves of eggs, so that when you dig into them, you got a nice melty goodnessy cheese right on up in there, okay? So now that that's done, we're gonna start on the biscuits. The oven is now preheated, and I'm adding these biscuits right on down. Now, when it comes to baking the biscuits, you do want to add like a little egg wash or something on there. Sometimes I just use like whatever leftover heavy cream I have, and that works fine. This egg was hard to crack and it had a feather on it. I don't know what was wrong with this egg, but I'm like, look, I'm using it for this purpose, so it's gonna be a wasted egg either way. That's why I don't like using egg washes, because I'm cracking a whole egg just to add some water in it and then discard like 90% of it. So I'm adding my water in, and when it comes to this egg wash too, you do want to be mindful just to get the tops, okay? So you're gonna see me when I'm putting my brush in here, I'm making sure to only get this egg wash on the very top, and you can see where it lands and everything. Like, it's gonna be a distinct color, but try not to get those layers, because that'll keep it from rising up the way you want your biscuit to go up, okay? And our last little step here is we need a little extra meat, so I have some hot links, and I want to know, has anybody else bought hot links lately? Because these hot links were not firm, they were like really soft, and I like mine burnt, but I'm like, these cook so fast. Like, I like me a nice burnt hot link, but I usually don't get to that point that quickly. I think they're taking something, or they're changing something in the hot links, and that's really throwing me for a loop, because who changes hot links? All right, now our biscuits are done. They look a lot better than I expected with those big pieces of butter, but that concludes this experiment. We did learn here that you can absolutely use the little squares of butter instead of shredding the butter. They did kind of like topple over, but that's partially my fault because I was in there making so many layers because I kept forgetting to put some butter down. Jesus, I keep saying butter. Put some flour down. So now we're gonna plate her on up, okay? Now, all in all, this breakfast is not the fastest, but it's not the longest either. So to get these biscuits done, start to finish, I would say it takes you like 30 minutes. Everything else comes together so quickly. And we're gonna top her on with some good old molasses, okay? I'm bringing back molasses, okay, because molasses is actually very nutritious, and I don't know why she slept on the way she is. So we're going back to molasses. We're throwing honey to the wind, okay? It's molasses season. So now we got to make a little sammy, okay? Just a little baby sandwich. That's all you need. I hope you and your families are doing okay in these very trying times. Be sure to follow along to get more recipes that have sustained our families through generations.